Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands. Searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bowhunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bowhunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bowhunting. Guys, welcome back. I'm super stoked. I've got Chris Hyde with me today. Chris, welcome, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Matty.
So, for people following along on Instagram, jump across to @bowhunting_somewhere. That is Chris's account. And you were actually recommended to me by a fellow listener. They kind of jumped on and said, hey, if you want to get some good insights, or they reckon that you've got some good insights that you've taught them. And they said that you're doing an incredible job with helping them out. And so they don't see why you couldn't do a good job on here. So I'm stoked to have you on, man.
Yeah, look, thanks. And I was a little bit surprised when I got the call, but I think it's, I guess it's like all the guys out there. I think we've all got, we've probably all got something to, that we can all pick up on. And I was interested to know who it was. And, I guess I probably have helped him out. The particular guy you're talking about, I probably helped him out a little bit. But, I think that's the nature of the industry. I think we've all got something to share a little bit, and hopefully we can, learn off each other. And, I reckon it's a great industry, and hopefully we can all just take a little bit away from each other. And if you can pick up something, I know I certainly like listening to other guys and take little things away from them. So I think it's great.
100% agree. And I think that's why I've really enjoyed doing the podcast so far, is that every person you talk to has their own experiences and insights that they can share with you. And I mean, even my lack of experience, I think, has been able to help a few people when I'm talking and doing the podcast. I think because I am so green, it's been able to help a few people that are in the same stages. But I mean, really, we've had such a broad spectrum on the podcast so far that it's been really cool to see where everyone's kind of started and where they've got to, and then the steps in between, and trying to fast track us beginners, I guess, is a big part of the podcast as well.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at the guys who are really experienced, in whatever field you're looking at, everyone started somewhere, and even the most experienced guys, and some of the guys that I really look up to, they started somewhere, and they were, inexperienced, the first time they started. So, I think it's something, as I said, that you can just take. It's like anything, you just take something away from, those experienced people, and you build on your own, a little bit of knowledge that you pick up yourself, and you take a little bit from this person, a little bit from that person, and, add it to, the experience that you get, and hopefully you can sort of build up a bit of a knowledge base with it, be about, I guess archery or hunting or, life in general. It's, I guess we're always learning, and keep an open mind, and, keep improving.
Yeah, I think there's, like you just touched on, like life lessons. There's a lot of them within archery as a hobby or a sport or a passion, whatever you want to call it. There's so much to take away from it outside of just shooting your bow and going out and chasing animals. There's a lot more to it than just that has kind of really drawn me in. I think it's definitely been quite the personal growth, I guess, item to add to the list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, that for me personally is, I guess that it's the, people talk about, what draws you to bow hunting or, to hunting in general. And I guess for me, yeah, it's the outdoors. Like, I love being in the outdoors, and, but for me, I guess it's that, that challenge. If I wanted to, it was just purely about, meat or just, I guess, for one of the better terms, killing something. I probably would just use a gun and just go and, shoot something. But I guess for me, it's that challenge about, there's no guarantees. And I think we've all been there, being close enough and being in bow range is one thing, but actually, being able to get the job done or keep your shit together, so to speak, when there's an animal, 20 yards away, being able to draw and, get an arrow in the right spot. I think they're the sort of things that I really enjoy. There's lots of times where you go out and, you're unsuccessful. And I think they're the sort of things, I guess they're the trips that make me a little bit more, I guess hungry to succeed. But, I guess it's the whole challenge of, being a bow hunter that I'm attracted to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it attracts a certain type of person as well. Like most bow hunters that I've come across have been really quality people because of that factor. Like they're willing to put in the hard yards, they're willing to deal with the challenge, and they're kind of willing to go through the shit before the shining diamond comes out the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking before we sort of, did this podcast, I was thinking back to, one of my first experiences with the bow, and I hadn't long had the bow, and, I'd always hunted with a rifle, I guess. And the first time I took the bow out, I was out and I was chasing red deer, and there was close to probably a 40-inch, 14-point red deer, and he was out in the open, and I kind of thought, oh, well, here we go, sort of on here. And for one, if I had the rifle, I probably could have shot him easily and shot him 100 times over. Yeah. But I still remember that experience so vividly, and I got into 60 metres, and it took me so long, and I actually, pretty embarrassing to admit it, but at the time, the judo, the Zwicky judo points, like the grass tips.
Oh, yeah.
So in my, I had 5 arrows in my quiver, and one of those, that was a six arrow in my quiver. And being very inexperienced, I had that. That was the arrow I pulled out, and I shot this Zwicky, grass judo point. That was what I shot at this massive red stag. And, I look back on that and I laugh now, but, they're all the things that I sort of, I guess, make you probably want to succeed a little bit more. But I do think back on that, and I did see a photo of what I believe to be that stag that someone actually shot. And
oh, wow.
I thought, yeah, that's an amazing animal. But, I can look at it now. I don't take myself too serious, and I do look at it and think, geez, that would have been nice. But anyway.
That's a good story, though. That's a good laugh. I've heard stories of people just going through the process over and over and over again, just practicing like target archery, for instance, and they pick up their bow and just go for the shot without actually putting an arrow in because they're just so focused on going through the process as such they forget to even knock an arrow, and just seeing bows explode. Like I haven't seen it individually, but I've had a few people tell me about it. I'm like, wow, it's actually a pretty common thing to have happen. So I think just going through those steps is it's funny that's the mistakes that we make when it's such an expensive sport, and a cost like that's such a time investment that's lost really when it's a mistake on the arrow.
Yeah, and I guess bow hunting brings lots of memorable moments, but that was a memorable moment, but maybe more a forgettable moment. But I guess it's times like those that you look back on and probably has made me I look at it, I don't really stress too much about that. I'm not driven, I guess, and I guess every individual is driven by different things, and to me that was something. It was a real steep learning curve, absolutely. And I would have loved to have got that animal,
Yeah.
But, I made a mistake, and I've got to look at myself, and it was my error, and that's what it was. And, he lived to fight another day, and he ran off, and he was a great animal, and that's bow hunting.
Yeah, exactly. And so for you, like, how did you come into bow hunting? You said you were rifle hunting before, but then you picked up the bow. How did that come about?
Yeah, I think I probably started like most people. I hunted with a rifle and grew up. My grandfather shot foxes and spent school holidays doing that, chasing rabbits and foxes around. He shot foxes for skins, and I guess it just evolved. And there was one stage I went out west with my uncle, and I kind of had been thinking a little bit about the bow, and I didn't really know anyone at that stage. I actually went on a Sambar hunting trip with a guy from Gippsland, and there was a gentleman from the South Coast, Jamie Lynch. I'd met him, and he was the first guy I ever knew had hunted with a bow, and he was hunting Sambar with a bow, and I kind of thought that's pretty crazy because I can't even get near Sambar with a gun, let alone a bow. Like, this guy's crazy. Anyway, that was probably 20 years ago, and so that was the first person I thought of or met, that had them with a bow. And I went out west with my uncle, and I'd always loved, hunting and shooting and that sort of thing. And we went out and I think we shot about 60 pigs in 2 nights. And I got home and it just didn't have the same feel. And I'd been to the Macquarie Marshes as a kid, and, we'd shot like so many pigs, it wasn't funny. And I just loved that. And I thought that was just the biggest deal in the world. And I got back from that and I was just so pumped. And then when I went out to that last trip out west with my uncle, it just didn't have the same feel. Yeah. And I just thought, maybe I will buy a bow. And I bought a bow. I can't remember what it was. It was a little PSE, and it had like the D, like the steel D loop. Yeah. And I took it into a shop and I knew nothing. And I had these arrows, and I went in. I was like, can someone have a look at this? I've got no idea about archery. I mean, and he literally picked the bow up, and I'm not even going to say what shop it was because I just got stitched. He looked at the bow. He charged me $100. The bow cost me $300. He looked at the bow, looked it up and down. I think he had less idea than I did. He charged me $100. Said, "Yeah, no, she's right to go." Right. And that was it. That's it. So I got stitched up. The bow cost me $400. And I was shooting the size of a basketball at like 20 yards, and I thought it was great. So that was kind of my introduction to bow hunting, and I didn't really know anyone. And then I thought, and I think that's where a lot of guys go wrong, is my initial start, I couldn't shoot the bow very accurately. I didn't know anything about it. I was shooting the side of the shed. I had a big brick wall, so I thought if I actually miss, at least it's not going to go into the neighbour's yard or anything like that. And then I actually chased Jamie's number down, and I spoke to him. I said, look, I'm sort of hitting about a 6-inch group at 20 yards. And he just sort of said, "Oh, man," he said, "you should be able to, put your arrows almost in each other." And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay." So that's when, the homework started for me, and I sort of started doing a bit more research. And that's, probably when I really got stuck into it and realised that I could do a lot better than I was. So, basketball-sized groups at 20 yards, you could actually improve on that. So that's how it all started.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually, a similar story, got stitched over with the group that I bought my first bow from, and it was a recurve. And they sent me away without having taught me or told me anything about the bow. They pretty much just said up and said, "There you go for gold." And I was shooting, so they've got the metal knock on them as well. And I was plugging my nocks in and putting it above rather than below where you're meant to knock it on. I shot it like that for the first 6 months at least. I had no idea. It was just, they never told me anything about it. I was like, it must be right. It's really frustrating that it moves away every time you try to shoot. I'm sure that's fine. So it's interesting, just those little learnings that you kind of pick up along the way, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the first animal you took with your bow then?
Yeah, so my wife's in-laws, they were on an orchard, and so I took the PSE down there, and they're on the Murray River on the border of the New South Vic border, and they had hares everywhere. They've since sold the orchard, but there was literally hares everywhere. And so my first animal, I guess, with the bow was a hare, and I thought I couldn't believe it. I was like, I've just shot a hare with a bow. This is amazing. I couldn't believe it. And I guess that's where the whole fascination started with, a bow, an arrow, a sight. This is primitive and you can do this. And then that I guess that was the start of, I don't know whether an obsession is the right word, and I think guys would probably relate to that. But
healthy obsession.
Maybe a fascination more than obsession. I think obsessions are unhealthy. Fascinations are maybe more healthy. I don't know. But that's, I guess, where it started. And that was the first animal I took with it. And I just realised then that I needed, doing a bit of research and stuff, I realised that you could actually shoot the bow a lot more accurately than what I was doing. And then doing the research and reading up, and thought I want to get better at this and I want to get more consistent. And, that was, I guess, where it all started.
Going back to the orchard days, do you know how much stock they were losing due to the animals around place?
No, look, when the trees were little, they had a citrus orchard, so
okay.
when they planted the new trees, which they only had like 150 acres of citrus, so it was, I guess the damage was probably negligible. I mean, they would lose a few trees, but there was lots of hares on that orchard. I can say that. I think one year prior to the bow, I think we, just before Christmas, so it would have been November, December, I think we shot about 20-odd hares, 25 hares in the orchard. So that puts a dent in the numbers.
Yeah.
But, I think the damage, they do choose the little trees, but at that stage I don't think there was a lot of little trees in the orchard. But
I've heard stories of, for instance, like vineyards losing up to $10,000 a month due to the critters around the place. So your different bits and pieces coming in just to chew on the grapes, usually kangaroos, your hares and your rabbits, and then also your deer will come in and feed on that. So pretty crazy the amount of money that can be lost due to the wildlife, really.
Yeah, well, there was no deer, I guess, where they were situated. There's no deer, so it was pretty much roos and hares, but the roos didn't really do too much damage. It was more just driving around. Like there was a few vehicle accidents in the orchard, but apart from that, they did, and fence damage. But apart from that, they didn't do too much damage to the trees.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so for you, you keep talking about how you figured out that you could be a bit more technical with your bow and figure out a little bit more around, I guess, assessing your shot process and making it a better system to make sure that you were shooting correctly and shooting good groupings. How did that look like from going to the basketball size to getting decent shots where you're able to go out and cull your first animals? Like, how did that look?
Yeah, look, and that's still, I guess, a process for me that is, I guess, still evolving. And I think the more, for me personally, the more I know and I guess the better I get at it, probably the more I want to know too. So and that's something that I guess has probably evolved over, it's not a overnight thing, and I guess there's probably guys who are listening that's not something that you can just do, in a 2 month or 3 months period. Like that's a lifetime, and there's some guys out there, to be honest, who would forget, more about archery than I'll ever know. But I look at some of the stuff, and I know, the knock-on stuff that John Dudley is doing, like the 101, 102, like some of the information on the internet now is just, it's amazing, and it's really detailed, and that's where I go. I look at that. I listen to his podcasts. I film myself in the shed. I just find it amazing, and I'm probably really, really into that, the technical side of it as well. I've still got a shitload to learn. But, I know Ian Summers, he's been on, on your podcast, and I know he does, I think it's Summers Archery Solutions. So there's some guys, in Australia, I think Brad Murphy, he's the Australian bowhunting coach. He does some good stuff. So there's lots of guys out there who are putting out really good information. But for me, my first look is to go to that, the knock-on stuff on the internet, because it's accessible. You can rely on it. It's there. It's correct. And it's, there's always information there that you can follow up.
I mean, his stuff, like that the 101, that is literally, it's an hour-long episode. Like, there's some pretty in-depth stuff that you can say in an hour. Like, you think about how many words we say within an hour, and if it's detailed and really focused on attention to detail, that you're going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, like he's got the 101, the 102, then he talks about, his releases, he talks about arrow builds, he talks about arrow spine. Like, it's just, I think it's just a resource that if guys are out there and they want to kind of get better, it's pretty easy to just, YouTube, Wi-Fi YouTube these days. You just punch it in and, you can have a look at it. And all the information is there. And, I feel like, well, why wouldn't you tap into that resource,
That's how I learn literally most things I do. Like, all the things I do within my business, for instance, like online stuff that we deal with, I'll be like, how to, and then type in whatever it is and just watch YouTube videos all day long when I'm trying to learn something new. And it's incredible what you can learn on YouTube.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me with it is it's important that there's a lot of information out there, I guess.
Making sure it's correct information.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, you can learn a lot of stuff off the internet, but just because you read it in a newspaper or you see it on the internet doesn't mean it's correct. But I guess, the important part, well, I'm assuming that a lot of stuff that Dudley puts out is correct because he's been there.
He's got a big following, so I'm sure it is.
No, but and that's the thing, there's a lot of information out there, but I guess, what he's been able to do and his results and the people that he's got following him, and I guess his, results speak for himself. So speak for themselves. So I think that's really important too, that, it is accurate information that works.
Which one of his release aids did you get first?
Look, I actually bought the silverback.
Yep.
I was shooting a Scott shark, a caliper style release.
Yep.
And that was the first release I had.
Uh-huh.
I shot it, and I guess when we talk about, I don't know, the true definition of target panic, but I didn't have any issues, I guess, with target panic as such.
Yeah.
That anxiety, with the target. I guess, like any bow hunter, you've always have a bit of excitement, I guess, with, when you've got a 30-inch Sambar stag stand in front of you at 30 yards. Yeah. I mean, who's not going to get excited with that? But I wouldn't really say I had target panic. Like, I didn't have any issues, but just watching all Dudley's stuff and listening to his podcast, I kind of wanted to, I guess, improve myself. And, there was so much talk about the silverback and then the knock to it, and I kind of thought, well, I only live once. I want to improve myself and give this a go. So I ended up buying the silverback, which is purely like a tension-activated release.
Uh-huh.
Which is completely different to the caliper style of the Scott shark.
Yeah.
And when I first got that, I actually had a mate who had one, and I tried to shoot it. And the first few times I tried to shoot it, I was just like, whoa.
Did you smack yourself at all?
No, I didn't actually, but I think I lost about 3 arrows. Like, I don't know where they went.
Yeah.
And it really took, I really committed to it in October. Like, had some mates come down for a Sambar hunt, and that was in October. Mm-hmm. And I pretty much shot it since last October to now.
Yeah.
And it's taken that long to really get a really good feel for it.
Yeah.
And I think if you just pick up a release and you say, I'm going to shoot this, and you give it 4 weeks, you're probably not doing it justice, Like, I think you really got to commit to, trying something and really committing to it. So that was the silverback, and then I've just really now started to try the knock to it, which is the green release that Dudley has, which is a thumb release, which you kind of shoot it. He talks about shooting it in the same manner, but it's a thumb activated release. So they're the 2 releases. I've actually got 2 silverbacks and one of his thumb activated release, and he also does a hinge style release. But I'm not really into target archery. I know guys can hunt with the hinge, but for me, I'm probably happy with the 2 silverbacks and the thumb.
So since you've got the silverback, have you seen your shot accuracy increase a hell of a lot?
I would say yes and no. Like, I think what the silverback does is probably teach that, and he probably speaks about it better than I ever can, is I think it teaches you a little bit more about that consistency and dynamics of archery in terms of the perfection of archery, if you like. Like, anyone with your caliper style release, you probably can be a little bit static, and you can tend to aim, and then you can just hit the trigger, when your pin kind of hits hits your target. Yeah. Guys just kind of like, bang, like a rifle, if you like. I think what the silverback probably does is teaches you a little bit more about archery and really pulling through your shot, so to speak. And I haven't probably put how it actually does it into words. I've just heard him talk about it, but I think it actually teaches you a little bit more about archery, or how that, a dynamic shot should feel, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. I'd go and listen to him if you wanted
No,
to.
I think that's a good way to explain it. And I mean, a way that I've started using because I've got a trigger release, what you were talking about before, the Scott one used to have, mine's similar to that. And the way I started using my trigger release actually after I went and had like a PT session, I guess you'd call it an archery session with Jake Gasparowski, is starting to try to use it more like a back tension release instead of using it like a trigger. So I think the trigger, and so many people would think about just pulling the trigger and that's all you need to do for the shot. Whereas now what I'm trying to do is make the shot come from my elbow. So once I find position, I'll start to pull back, and that smooth, slow pull from the elbow is actually what lets the trigger loose rather than a physical finger punch. And that's where so many people talk about punching the trigger. And I thought I was doing it completely correct until I went and saw him. He's like, no, man, you're punching the trigger every time. I'm like, that's what they mean. Like pulling the trigger is punching the trigger. Like it was a big
absolutely.
realization. And I used some of his thumb releases on the day. And just even feeling the difference there was crazy. And I tried to use one of his back tension releases that he had there. It wasn't one of John Dudley's ones, but I tried to use it and I couldn't even pull my bow back. Like just getting used to the actual pullback of the bow with the back tension, I just couldn't do it because of how I've been pulling constantly. So it's pretty interesting. I can understand where you say you need to put like a year's worth of work into it to make sure that it's just there, it's ready to roll.
It's funny, because when you're like, he talks about it and he can articulate it so much better than I ever can. But with the silverback, what they talk about is like your pin float. When you're at anchor, you see your pin just floats around. That's the biggest difference, I guess, for me personally, is with like a trigger style release versus this tension release. The trigger style, I was very static, and once I could hold the bow really still, and almost like with the trigger, you just hit the trigger when the pin was, you hold it still, it's static. When it's on the target, you can just hit the trigger. Yeah. And that's what you do. But with the tension style release, because you've got to have your pin float. Yeah. Like your pin just floats around, and that's the biggest thing. Like you've got to say, I'm comfortable with that pin floating, like that's a little bit, when you first go to it, it's unnerving because your pin's just kind of floating around on the target, but I guess your focus is on just being really comfortable with that. And you notice that your pin it's almost like it's still on the target, but you notice that your pin is really wobbling around. Just keep pulling through the shot, and then all of a sudden your bow goes bang and it goes off, and you're kind of like, oh, where'd that go? And it's just amazing when you actually focus on, and it's so true, when you just focus on the process of just keep pulling through your shot, it's amazing that the arrows just kind of suck together and your accuracy can, really tighten up. The one thing I have noticed about the tension style release is it does, I guess, highlight form flaws. So if you got, you're putting torque with your front hand, or you're not pulling through like, pulling your back shoulder or your back elbow like straight back, or you're pulling away from your face, that's when you kind of get those, those probably left and rights. And, I think you've got to have really good form to shoot the silverback well, whereas it's probably hidden a little bit more with a trigger style release. And that's just, that's only my experience. Guys might say different or dispute what I'm saying, but that's what I've found.
I definitely think that there's something in that, and taking note of what's happening with your arrows constantly. Like, I think that's what I really like about archery, is that you can take a shot and realize what you did, or think about what you did compared to where you wanted it to go. So, for instance, it's shot right, and you need to figure out why it shot right. If you thought the pin was on sight, like where it should be actually aiming, what have you actually done wrong then? Because if everything in your shot was completely right in regards to where you've lined it up, it should have gone right there. So what have you stuffed up in the process to make that happen? And so going through like what the feeling should be of a shot, and then making sure that your process is the same every time, it really eliminates it eliminates any fault, I guess, from happening.
Yeah, and just probably not to harp too much on it, but I guess the thing with that tension style release is that whole surprise shot. I know is that's when you talk about what the perfect shot feels like, is the difference for me with that tension style versus the trigger. I know when the trigger's going to go off, because you kind of can feel it, and you almost anticipate, and that's why some guys run into that target panic situation where because they know it's going to go off and they might get a bit of anxiety, or they might think, oh, it's about to go. Whereas it's probably less likely with the tension, because you got to keep building the pressure, and you're not really sure when it's going to go off. So all your focus is on is building pressure, pulling through your shot, and when it goes off, it's that surprise.
Yeah.
So your focus is on that process rather than the result. So
yeah, definitely. No, that's awesome. I think there's a lot in that, and I feel like that's kind of. It's almost like a natural progression now. Most people seem to almost start with the trigger and then move to the back tension or a thumb release because of the way that it makes you shoot, which is really cool. So, I mean, something I wanted to talk to you about, Chris, is actually a lot of the hunting that you do. So, I mean, maybe if you could talk about the general region that you're in that you hunt, and then your main critters that you're chasing.
Yeah, look, I'm on the border, or I live in Albury, but I'm on the New South Vic border, and I guess the most accessible species here, there's fallow, obviously, and sambar as well. And the sambar here are, they're probably within half an hour. So that's probably for the guys up north and whatnot. That's you can duck out for a hunt, 45 minutes. You can do that. I've got 3 kids, work full time, play footy. Like most guys, about our age, it's sort of times we're all probably time poor. So
definitely.
To duck out Saturday morning or Sunday morning, just you can do a quick hunt. Afternoon, mornings. One of the guys I used to hunt with, he said, the long hunts are really good, your 10-day hunts or your week-long hunts, but in reality for our age group with kids and the commitments, it can be really difficult. He was almost like hunt close, hunt often, and that's something I've probably I really try and do. So sambar is probably the species that I chase the most, because it's here, it's accessible, it's public land. You can do it. You don't have to ring anyone. You don't have to tell anyone. You got to basically have a game license. You've got to find some good country, and you can just go.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's definitely something I'm trying to work on, is getting something closer to home, which is so hard because I'm in Brisbane. So it's like Queensland in itself is hard enough, but trying to get private access is the only way we can hunt here, really. So getting something that was only half an hour or an hour away would be like the absolute dream, because like you said, you can get away just for that morning or just that afternoon. Because I mean, realistically, I'm seeing my hunting go afar from me right now because I don't have the time to put into it. I don't have a weekend where I can go from Saturday even to Sunday. Like we've just been so busy recently that it isn't happening, and it's only going to get busier because we've got a kid on the way. So I'm like, fuck, how do I make this happen?
Yeah, man. Well, like as I said, I got 3. Yeah, got three under 7.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's always a juggling act, and there's plenty of guys who have been there before us. But that's the thing for me, is just, I guess, hunting often, because the thing with the sambar, from my point of view, is I feel like you just got to keep tabs on them, and it's about for me as a bow hunter, it's knowing your country. That's the biggest thing, and it's just being able to keep tabs on where the deer are, and to have those successful hunts, whether it be in morning or afternoon. This time of year is really difficult, I guess. In the not really difficult, but the fog, it gets really foggy.
Yeah.
So it can be, if you know where the deer are, you can see the deer, it's good. But sometimes when that visibility is down to 20 meters, like thick as pea soup, it sort of can be really frustrating. So those afternoon hunts are good this time of year, but it's just about keeping tabs on where the deer are, and if you can sort of get an idea through just going regularly or trail cams, that's what I've found to be really, I guess, advantageous for me personally.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's just a lot of those, fringe deer or is understanding where they kind of are. In my experience with a lot of those deer, if they're not getting a lot of hunting pressure, that they only go back up in the bush as far as they need to.
Yeah.
Like if there's hunting pressure, they'll go back and they'll, get back up on high on the ridges and whatnot. But if they're not being pushed around too much and there's not too much human scent and there's not people, following up every weekend or during the week, the deer they'll only go back really as far as they need to.
Yeah.
They don't bed on the edge of, on the edge of open stuff often.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll just, head back up in the bush 500, 600, 700 metres, and that's kind of where they'll be.
Yeah.
That's the hinds and young ones. And then, of course, the stags will, you'd be a millionaire if you knew where the stags were.
Well, I mean, the Sambar in particular are quite an elusive deer, and I feel like it wasn't that long ago that people thought it was going to be impossible to get them with a bow. Whereas now, like, you're seeing guys like yourself and guys like Josh Rogers get out and get a lot of footage and get a lot of deer on the ground, which is crazy. What are maybe some of the commonalities you're finding from the different Sambar that you're dealing with? Yeah,
look, I think there's, I wasn't around, I was around 30 years ago, but I didn't hunt the deer 30 years ago. And I know, talking to my uncle, I think there's a lot more deer now, Sambar, and Josh probably, the hound crews, he might be able to shed some more light on it. But I think just with the fires and, the habitat they can, inhabit, I think there's a lot more deer now than there used to be. And I even look around this area, like there's Sambar around the Albury area and that where people have seen and I've seen, and I'm just like spun out by where they are. It's like kangaroo country, like there's just north of Albury, there's Sambar west of Albury, and it's just like it's traditionally not Sambar country. And I'm just like, this is amazing, you know what I mean? And you see where they're popping up now. So for me, like, they're definitely in more places now than they've kind of ever been.
Yeah, cool.
And I think, as a hunter, I reckon it's great.
Yeah.
As a, an ecologist or biologist or a greenie or whatever you are, maybe that's not so good. But I think there's opportunities there. I actually can't remember what your question was. Sorry, I don't have an answer.
It was just about the commonalities of where you're finding them and like the places they are and the things they're doing.
Yeah, and I think like there's guys, farmers I've spoken to, like some of the guys, like they've said, 20 years ago that was the first time they'd seen Sambar on their place, and now there's, they've got, it's a fully kind of huntable population, and you can go out there and you can, see, a number of Sambar. So it's just, I think there's certainly more now than there ever used to be.
Yeah.
Which, as I said, from a hunting point of view and hunting perspective, I think it's great. There's guys. There's a lot. There's a chiller sort of opened up now that is taking venison. So there's those kind of farm fringe, obvious, easy deer. Now, I think, I'm not sure exactly how long it's been open, but probably 12 months, or don't quote me on the actual time frame, but that, notice now that there's probably some of those easy deer that, are really obvious, out in the day, that sort of thing. They're probably being tipped over, and there's been quite a number of deer being shot for, I'm not sure if it's pet food or what it is, but there's a chiller that's now open that's taken a fair bit of venison in.
Yeah, there you go. And are they paying the farmer for that then, or just whoever brings them in?
Yeah, look, I don't know the exact arrangements, and but I would, I don't sort of want to speculate too much, and I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but I think there's quite a few being tipped over and taken into the chiller.
Yeah. And so for you, when you're getting access to, say, public land, you go out, what are you kind of looking for when you're chasing Sambar? Like, where are you going, and what are the signs you're looking for outside of scat, say, for instance?
Yeah, look, I think for me, it depends. Like, so I lived in Melbourne for 10 years, and we did probably then, when I was down there, probably went to a lot of areas. Victoria is a really big place in terms of, to hunt Sambar deer, but it's small also if you actually put a lot of time in terms of the area. And I know that sounds probably a little bit contradictory, but if you spend every weekend, not saying I spend every weekend, but if you spend time in the bush in Victoria, you'll kind of work out that there's some areas that are really good for stalking, and there's some areas that kind of, are probably maybe not as great for stalking.
Yeah.
So when I was in Melbourne, I kind of, before kids and before too many commitments, spent a fair bit of time, in the high country, and I guess spent a bit of time on that high plains sort of country. I'm talking probably Dargo, Mount Howard. Now those areas, get a lot of people. They get a lot of bushwalkers.
Yeah.
But that was sort of areas that I found really fascinating just because of the terrain, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And up there is a little bit different to hunting your kind of, your valley systems, more like your Buffalo or your Buckland valleys.
Yeah.
They're more your high plains, your the terrain. You've kind of got like your I can't even think of the plant names, but you sort of you're out where the snow is, your snow gums and that sort of where the snow sits in the winter. So they're obviously out of action in the winter when the snow's there.
Yeah.
But they're good kind of in the summer. And so it depends on where you want to hunt, depends what you want to what area you like to do. I'm a little bit funny in the sense that sometimes I like going to areas rather than just chasing a specific deer. Like sometimes I like going to Mount Howard or Howard High Plains just because I like the area, and then I'll kind of work out,
instead.
Yes, because I've been there a few times and I enjoy that, or going to Dargo just because I like the area, so to speak, or I'll meet up with friends and have a hunt there for a week. So it's just each their own, I guess, like that.
Now, the Sambar have a different rutting season to the rest of the deer. I believe they don't necessarily have, like they do have times of year where they're more likely to be, but it isn't as structured as, say, like a red or a fallow.
No, look, in my experience, and all guys will have their own sort of opinions. They're certainly not like fallow or reds where, say for the fallow, the 1st or the 10th of April, pretty much they're going hard.
Yeah.
The Sambar, in my opinion, that I've found, it can vary between, location to location. So, and it is literally that. It just varies. So, you can have a ruddy stag, kind of any month of the year. In my experience, like some areas, I guess, I've seen them rutting hard, like in May, like up high, like early May, and then in other areas, like an area where I was, like on the weekend just gone, like there's no rutting activity kind of at all that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think it's location and site specific.
Yeah.
In saying that, I think probably the two, what I like as the two best months, I feel like September, October are the two kind of better months.
Okay.
And that's probably a combination of everything. For me, it's probably a little bit more time, there's a little bit more daylight.
Yeah.
But just I've looked at my cameras over the years, and it's not specifically talking about big stags, but that's kind of the time of year. If you look at Instagram and you look at guys' accounts, there's always September, October is always the kind of time of year where guys are shooting, deer or stags that are coming out on paddocks.
Yeah.
And it's probably the time of year, to be honest, where you get, I've seen where you get on the trail cameras, you get a lot more sort of daylight activity on your cameras. Mm-hmm. And that's not talking in the open, like just in the bush, like you seem to get a bit more, I have seen in the areas where I've had my cameras is I've had a lot more, day walkers, if you like, where their deer are on the cameras in daylight hours. So again, the Sambar, there's sort of no rules to them. They do their own thing. I don't know what Josh Rogers, he's obviously got a lot of footage and a lot of camera images of them, he might say, no, that's, complete BS. I've found this, this, and this, but that's probably.
I think, like you said, it's based on location and based on what you've seen. So, yeah, it's kind of and I think that's why people have always said that they are so elusive, and why they're such a crazy critter.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, for me, as I said, if I was to pick 2 months where I wanted to hunt them, I'd hunt them in September, October. In saying that, like for Sambar, if you told me I could only hunt them in May, June, I'd be happy to hunt them in May, June too.
Yeah.
So I think the best part about them is, you can literally hunt them 12 months of the year, and maybe from probably mid-December to March, they're probably majority or a large percentage of them might be in velvet, but I would never not go hunting Sambar because I'm worried that I wouldn't find a hard antlered stag. And that's, I guess, that's a good thing, and that's one of the things I enjoy about them.
Yeah. Is that something that that is very common for them, their antler cycle?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think it's a kind of I don't know, the percentage-wise, like I haven't owned a deer farm. I know Errol Mason's written a book, and he's tried to kind of quantify, what sort of percentages and stuff of deer are in hard antler at this time and that time. But I think, as I said, a percentage, like a higher percentage of deer sort of fall into a cycle. But again, like I don't have facts or figures to
base it off,
to back up anything I'm saying. It's just my kind of what I guess a bit of a gut feel, but it's that I think more stags are in velvets, that January, February, March, April, time than anything else. There was I saw some stags the other day, and they were all rubbed out and hard. So I think that's probably site specific a little bit as well.
And so end of May, start of June, just in case it's a timely podcast, people listening down track. So that's the time of year you've seen that. In regards to like food, is there something that you're typically finding them munching on all the time, or do you ever open up their pouches once you've opened them, or once you've killed them? Sorry.
Yeah, look, I don't look at it a hell of a lot, to be honest, in terms of opening them up. One thing, I guess, in the areas where I hunt is I think the food in the bush for them at this time of year, I think it goes pretty rank. So they do get out on the, improved pasture, at this time of year. In saying that, they'll do that before the frost. Like they'll get out, they won't be feeding on a frosty. Like who wants to eat a, piece of frozen grass?
Icy lettuce, yeah.
Icy lettuce, yeah. They go, gets burnt and you don't want to eat that. But so I think during again, this is only my experience, in those winter months and talking to farmers and just guys who've been around, I think there's a pretty high concentration of the deer who actually get out on the pasture, during the winter, because I think the food in the bush gets a bit rank and goes a bit stale.
Yeah.
And then as spring comes and you get that spring growth back in the bush, they probably head back up. But in saying that, it's also September, October is also that time, when the clover on the paddocks, shoots and they get a lot of deer out, or not a lot, but a lot for Sambar, if you know what I mean. That's when a lot of the deer sort of pop out of the edge of the timber and they can be seen on sort of daylight. So it's, I don't know, man. I can't work them out. You've just got to be out there. You're not going to shoot them on the couch. You've just got to be out poking around.
Yeah.
And, if in doubt, just get out there.
Yeah. So when you're setting up your trail cameras, for instance, where are you trying to look? Like, what makes or what dictates a good place to place a cow? Oh my God, I'll get there with my words. A trail camera. What dictates a good place for that?
Oh, well, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask, because the last setup I put, I thought it was a good place. I thought it wasn't facing the sun. I didn't think there was any branches, that were going to set off the camera. I went back there and I think I'd flattened the batteries in 2 days and I had 3,000 images of this branch in the sun. So, so I'm not really sure. But look, I guess I got a couple of cameras. It just depends. For me, like I've got them on wallows at the moment, and I kind of made a bit of a pact to myself that I didn't want to move them because I wanted to have 12 months of, of these cameras just on the same wallows. Yeah. And I just wanted to see, again, looking when I said that September, October, I was kind of working on a bit of a theory that I wanted to kind of prove to myself whether my theory was right with that also. And I had them on scrapes for the last 12 months. These two scrapes that I guess knew that they were reasonably what I thought was a bit of a thoroughfare of where the deer would always travel. Yeah. And I had them on those two scrapes in different areas, and that's where I noticed that there was, I guess, saying more day walkers. There was a lot more deer that came through those scrapes in the daytime in September, October, and I was just curious. Then I moved them to these wallows, and I put them on in October last year. So I'm curious to see whether the same happens at the wallows as well. Yeah. The only thing that probably might, change that result is we had that really dry spell, so they didn't probably get water in them till April. So between almost when I put them on the wallows in October to April, they basically didn't have water there. So you've got to go back. Yeah, and that's the time of year where they may not be wallowing a hell of a lot, because I think it was kind of the time, it was the end of October, start of November, and there wasn't a lot of activity from what I saw that they might have slowed up a bit. So, look, as I said, anywhere, I think for me, I've had my cameras in the shed a lot too, and again, just anywhere, like a scrape is better. Putting it on a scrape or putting it on, a game trail is better than having it sitting in your shed. At least you're going to see something, Yeah. You're not going to see anything in your shed.
No, exactly. Based on like the scrapes and the wallows, when they are an older one, so something that maybe hasn't been used for a while, would you still put it there anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, the ones I put them on, when I actually put my trail camera on it, they hadn't been used. The scrapes hadn't been used, but I kind of said to myself, well, I'm going to put them on. I'm just going to refresh the batteries, and I want to put them on there, and I want to leave them for 12 months. Yeah. Now, other guys might be completely different to me. They might say, well, there's no way I'd do that. I'd put it on something that was fresh, and I know the deer have been there, or I know, the deer are frequenting that wallow now. But for me, I was just like, as I said, it was sitting in the shed. I thought, I want to see when the deer, it was a, scrape close to, in two different spots. It was along the kind of a creek floor, and I kind of wanted to see when they actually used that. So that was the reason I put them in those two locations, because I was just curious. It was in the thick stuff, and I was actually planning. Well, I thought I want to see when they walk through here in daylight, because there was a couple of big trees. I thought I might, I haven't actually hunted from a tree stand with the bow, but I thought I would like to, see if I could shoot something from a tree stand. So that was probably the motivating factor for me why I put them where I did.
And so anything further on the tree stand yet?
Well, yeah, I did. Yeah, I listened to the Knock On podcast, and then he was talking about these two guys who'd fallen from tree stands and really hurt themselves. So it kind of put that on hold. I don't actually have a tree stand. I got a couple of mates who have got them. So for people who know me, like, I'm pretty terrible at like building things and doing things. I take safety serious, but like I don't think I trust myself to put a tree stand up very well. So I don't want to like fall out of a tree stand and break my back or something. Like that sort of frightened me a bit. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll just try and, scangle around and try and shoot one from the ground.
Put it on hold for a little bit. Until, like, I don't think they're that popular over here to actually buy either. I'm not sure. I haven't really checked out.
No, I've got a mate there's a couple of mates who have got them, and I just, I don't know too much about them. And as I said, it sort of spooked me a bit when they were talking about one guy, he only fell, I think he fell 6 feet and broke his back, and he was spent, a fair bit of time in hospital. So I was kind of like, oh, I'm sure he knows more about them than I do, and if he can fall out of them.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's so easily done. Hopefully with you being a bit more active, I don't know what this guy was like, but with you being a bit more active and taking some knocks and footy and stuff, you'd be a bit more resilient, but you can never tell, right?
Yeah, that's it. So it sort of put that a little bit on hold. But as I said, I was still thinking about it. I was out the other day and I was looking at the trees and I was actually thinking, you know what? I think I could actually be successful if I did do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'd probably get cold too.
I'd say so. Talking to James Doomstis about it, he was saying that he'll go in through the ferns down in Victoria and you can't see through any of that. So what he'll do is he'll find a dead tree, and it was based on what someone else had told him. He'll climb up a dead tree, like just crawl up it just so he can kind of have that down view in it. And he said it's amazing what you'll see when you get just that little bit above, that little bit of elevation just gives you a whole new perspective on where they can be and what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking about Jamie Lynch before, and he's got this tree that he comes down to Victoria and he's got a tree, and I think he's an arborist, so he knows how to, I don't think he has a tree stand as such, but he's got climbing gear, and he's got this one tree that he comes down, and I think every time he's come down and sat in that tree, he's actually shot something. So,
wow.
He always talks about this tree, and he's like, man, every time I get up there, there's deer just in this wallow all the time. So that's sort of what got me thinking about it. And I know guys obviously can be really successful. And it was that October month, I thought, when I was looking at the trail cam, I had it on a spreadsheet about the visits and when they turned up. And I thought, if I actually sat in that tree in October, I think I would get an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Tell us about your spreadsheet. What are you keeping track of?
Well, it was purely it was just literally visits, and it wasn't looking at big stags, or it wasn't looking at anything other than just daytime walks, and pretty much we're in one location of one of the cameras. It was just much for all of October. This one particular scrape, it was like I said to myself, if I spent a day there, if it was, if this October was the same as last October, I would have an opportunity. And that was, so that was kind of, and I thought my little trail cam adventure, I thought that was, that it worked.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really important. I think it's something good to know. Like we're often analysing how we shoot as a hunter or as a target archer. So why shouldn't we be analysing how we hunt as well, and taking away those things, like writing down, for instance, like what the weather was doing and what you saw and how the wind was and what it kind of did for you, whether it was of benefit or not. And I think all those little things, like those little intricacies that we don't really focus on that much, can really make or break a hunt and change the way that you do hunt each day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the wind is a big one, especially the experienced guys. It probably was mentioned to me one time, the wind and the thermals are massive from any kind of a hunter, whether you hunt with a gun, a bow, a Shanghai, whatever it is. But I think just knowing your country and knowing where the wind is and what it's doing, and what I kind of mean by that is, it took me a little while to work out the wind in terms of if you're trying to hunt a spot, sometimes you actually have to, you might have to get into a gully. You might have to walk into a spot like with the wind up your ass to get over a ridge, and then for the wind to be back in your face. And I reckon when I say to talk about like knowing your country, sometimes if you don't actually walk that, you're not going to work that out. So it's just understanding what the wind's doing at that point in time, and, by walking it, you work that out. So you might walk into a gully knowing it's going up your ass and knowing that whatever's in front of you is going to blow out, but knowing that when you get over that ridge or into that next system, that's where the wind's going to be right, and that's where you're trying to hunt your deer. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the things that I looked at. I just got to go here. Right. Sorry. That's one of the things I looked at from my point of view was just, I guess, understanding that. And sometimes it is hard as a bow hunter to walk somewhere with the wind up your bum, but to get into a spot where then it's going to be in your face. And I think that's an important part.
Yeah, that's something I'm still battling with. The property I have access to it's hilly. It's got some ridges. It's bits and pieces everywhere, and it seems like you walk 50 meters and it just changes. Like it'll do a 90-degree or a 180-degree change on you, and it can vary from day to day. Like some days you're like, okay, this was happening yesterday. I'll jump over this ridge and it should be blowing back at me, and it's not like that at all. It does vary based on how strong the wind is that's actually blowing.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because one of the things with, like, I guess with the Sambar, I suppose any deer, is just that afternoon thermals or the morning thermals is sometimes like you're itching to get into a spot in the afternoon, and you might have the wind will be going up the gully in the afternoon, and then the deer are in that gully. If you go in too early, your thermals are just going to just take so. Just having that, you've taken a day off, or you got an afternoon off. All you want to do is go in and look for those deer, where you've got to kind of wait for those thermals to change, which only leaves you 40 minutes.
Yeah,
you're better off waiting that 40 minutes for the wind to, the thermals to change, and then you walking in the bottom of that gully when the thermals are coming down. Admittedly, you've only got 35 minutes to try and get that animal, but your chances are so much higher.
So much higher, yeah, it's crazy.
And you're in prime time, But I guess guys, and probably myself included, when you have, a day off and you think, I want to go hunting Sambar, you're thinking, I've taken a whole day off and I'm, just leaving it to the last 35 minutes. This doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
But it's probably increasing your success if you can actually do that, So
how about in the morning, for instance, if you're trying to get out nice and early, like if you want to be there for daylight, what are you doing based on the thermals? Like, is that something that will stop you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always kind of thinking, what's the wind going to be doing? Where do I think the deer will be?
Yeah.
Like the other morning I went out and I kind of thought that where the deer might be, it was actually really, really windy, and I went where I thought it was really, really windy, and I thought, well, they're not going to be here because it was just too windy. So, like this time of year, where all things being equal, and it's not too windy, where there's going to be sun, like these frosty mornings is great, because they're just on those kind of open faces with a bit of northerly aspect. That's hopefully where you can find the deer, but you've got to get that, I guess that balance right, because you don't want to be halfway up, when your thermals change and your scent just carries up to the deer, you'll never see them again. So, it absolutely kind of dictates where you hunt, or where you hunt and where you don't hunt.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's such a learning in that, and it's one that I think, like you said, you have to base it on where you're going. Like it is such a different thing each time. Like there's obviously the few things you can stick to and know about the thermals, but even then, like the wind can just change so much based on the environment.
Yeah, like in the morning, for example, there's one face that I hunt that's relatively open, and when the sun hits it, like the thermal's coming down in the morning, and the deer are obviously moving up that, moving back up that face, and the thermals are coming down.
Yeah.
So you're sort of, if you followed the deer up that face, the thermals are coming down, but as soon as the sun hits it, the thermals start, they start going up. Yeah. So you're kind of in that. If you're halfway up that face, you're in that in between. You're not sure exactly what height the deer are.
Yeah.
And the thermals, you're not sure when the sun's hitting it, your thermals are starting to rise then. So depending on what level the deer are at, you're not sure whether you're too high or you're too low.
Yeah.
So in that situation, what I would do if I got time, I'd probably hunt that face in the afternoon where the sun goes. That's the face that's going to be, in the shade in the afternoon. So the thermals come down in the afternoon. Then I'd go and hunt that face from the bottom in the afternoon, that last hour, and I'd just go a third of the way up and I'd just contour along that face really slowly. Mm-hmm. And then the deer are obviously coming down.
Yeah. And
the thermals are coming down. So, I'm hopefully going to see the deer coming down. And that's just, using the thermals and the lay of the land to your advantage. Now, it sounds really logical when you think about it. But when I would never have done that when I was first started. All I wanted to do was get up in the hill and get to the highest point and try and shoot a deer.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's definitely some game planning that needs to go into it, which is awesome. So 2 last questions I want to ask you, Chris, before we wrap it up. First one being, have you ever had any near misses in the bush? Anything that's kind of been a scary situation where you potentially, not life-threatening, but they could have almost been?
Not, I wouldn't say life-threatening. Or I remember it was probably the guy, Mick, who put you onto me. We were 18-year-olds. Might have been 17, and we hiked into the Wanangata when we were, just might have been 17.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit naive. We were like, we can do this backpacking caper and we're right to go. We got in there. We sort of probably didn't look at the forecast that well, and it was pretty much rain.
Yeah.
But, we'd had time off, so we were going anyway. We got in there, we crossed the river, and all as it did was rain. Like it just rained and rained and rained. And apart from nearly drowning in our tent, the river just came up like overnight. And I guess the guys who have been big high country or New Zealand know what the rivers do when it just rains.
Yeah.
Being inexperienced and a little naive, we were kind of like, we're going to get the hell out of here. So we kind of said, let's go. Yeah. We just packed up. I tipped all my food out, all my water out, which wasn't an issue because there was
lots of water.
And let's get the hell out of here. And trying to cross the river for one was just like, I look back on it now and just think, what an idiot. And then we made our way back up to the helipad, like through snow that I honestly felt sick in the stomach. Like I was just like, and we hadn't driven in snow. I didn't know. Like it was just inexperienced, and that was probably I guess a learning curve. We got out of there all right, and it was a full day. We left early in the morning, got out the night, but that was probably one of the look back on now and think that was probably a little bit of an experience that thankfully didn't go wrong, but could have easily went wrong.
No, it's good to hear. It's probably something that might save someone else down track, hopefully. And I mean, this whole podcast has been full of them, but is there any major insights you think you could give to, say, a beginner bow hunter, something you said like that you can give and say, hey, this is something that I would really, if I had my time over, this is something I would go and do straight away?
Yeah, look, I think I touched on it earlier. The knock on John Dudley stuff on YouTube, I think that is as good information as anyone. As I said, I know Brad Murphy's doing the stuff in Australia. I haven't been to any of Brad's stuff. I understand it's really good.
Yeah.
Ian Summers does a good job from what I understand. I haven't been in contact with Ian in regards to that stuff. But for any guy just, I guess, starting out, that, John Dudley, I think you Google John Dudley 101 archery.
Any of it. Like, it's so accessible. And I think that's the biggest thing is it's using those platforms that we've got now.
Yeah, the information is correct. That's where I'd start if I had my time again. So
I've messaged Dudley so many times. I'm trying to get him on the show. He hasn't even replied yet, but that's right. I'll keep trying.
I can't believe it, man.
I know he'd just be run off his feet. Like the amount of things that he's doing, the hunts he's on, the podcast he's on, the bits and pieces he's doing. Like he's dealing with another level, really. But I'm like, come on, give us small timers a chance.
Yeah, that's it.
But no, I think his work is incredible, the stuff he's doing, and you're completely right. Like learning from a coach, getting those steps ahead is massive. And I mean, something that I do in day-to-day life is I coach people. Like I coach them in health and fitness. I coach them like how to lead a healthier life or how to be fitter, and like different protocols in fitness to make them fitter, faster, stronger. And it's like I've always had a coach on that side of things, and it makes a lot of sense to me, like in anything that you do, to have a coach. Like have a mindset coach, have yourself a health coach, have yourself an archery coach. Like anything that you're trying to do, like it is good to learn from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the biggest thing for me, I guess, with archery and anything is you can learn off anyone, and you got to have you keep an open mind, and for we don't know. I don't know it all. I love listening to people. I love trying to learn off someone. And even if that person is inexperienced, they might have experienced something more than you that you could learn off them. And I just think, I guess, as a hunting, as an archery community, if we've all got, I guess, an open mind and we can just, not probably judge each other, we can just keep listening, keep learning. That's the biggest thing for me.
Something I've actually been doing a lot recently, or I've done it twice, so it's not a lot, but I've gone and met up with some local boys and just actually shot with them, and that's been absolutely incredible. Like, people who are just a little bit more advanced than me, and they've been doing it for a fair few more years, and just the things that I can pick up in a day of shooting with them is absolutely incredible. So, I mean, I went and shot my compound bow with Jake Quinn, and just the stuff I got from him. He's just got a little archery target set up in his backyard. Like, he's got 4 different targets you can shoot on, and just sitting and talking and shooting all day, the tips you pick up are incredible. And then same goes for Adam Barter. I went out with him and we just shot our recurves for the day. And it's just so cool to kind of have those insights from someone who's done it and practiced it and played with it. And I feel like we can come together a lot more. Like, yes, socials are a great platform, but meet up with people, like get together and have a few shots together. Like, even if it's only for an hour, I'm sure you can talk and learn a lot about what you're doing and what's working for you as an individual. Yeah,
absolutely. And as I said, you keep an open mind, and there's lots of people out there who've probably, run into the same, little pitfalls, or they're probably, if you're having some problems, I'm sure there's someone out there who's had exactly the same problems and have learned worked out how, what's worked for them to get out of it. So it's important that we do help each other out.
No, that's awesome. Chris, thanks so much for your time, man. Once again, people can find you at bowhunting_somewhere. Is there anywhere else you want to reach out or anything you want to leave the listeners with?
No, mate, look, I just, appreciate what you're doing for the community. Hopefully I've helped out in some way.
Definitely.
Like I said to you before the podcast, mate, they're only my opinions. There's not a lot of, there's not too much,
set in stone.
Set in stone. That's only my opinion. If guys want to kind of disagree, that's fine. Yeah. I don't take it too serious.
I mean, don't just disagree. Give him some insights as well. Like, hey, this is my opinion instead. Like, it doesn't have to be a battle.
Yeah, that's right. It is what it is. Yeah. They're only my thoughts.
Well, I think it's very valuable. Like, it's from your learnings, and I mean, you've got the proof based on the cameras. You've got the proof based on the animals you're putting down. So I think it's very insightful to hear from you. So, yeah, thanks heaps.
Righto, man. I appreciate your time. Thanks for your help.
Likewise. That's it. That's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this week. If you have not already, please do hit subscribe. If you want to leave us a great little review, that would also be highly appreciated. However, follow along with our journey at becomingabowhunter.podcast on Instagram and Facebook. You can also check out our website, which is www.becomingabowhunter.com. And if you want to email me of any guests or any questions that you would like answered on the podcast, then you can get in touch with me via email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Make sure you join us next week. Big love from us at Becoming a Bowhunter.